Hi everyone, feeling enthusiastic for this week's Snap UK podcast. Gary is in the middle of stuffing his face in a hotel somewhere in Boston. Boston?
Norfolk.
Oh, well anyway.
Boston.
So he'll be along shortly. And Paul couldn't be bothered to be here again because he has a life, apparently. But we're here. Jim's here. Say hi, Jim.
Hi, I don't have a life.
Well, no, you just have to deal with inept people at work. And John's here. Say hi, John.
Hello, John.
John, are you dealing with inept people at work?
Always.
Me too, and I am self-employed. So
yeah.
That tells you all you need to know. We've got a few things to run through because we haven't done this for a couple of weeks. So we're going to dive straight in and discuss the COVID opt-outs and how other sports are dealing with working in or out of a COVID-friendly bubble. Firstly, the opt-outs. It turns out no one has to play the Patriots this year because we've lost about 45 of our players already. I think we're up to 8 at the moment, including very big players: Marcus Cannon, Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, one of our very thin wide receiver core, Marquise Lee,
Matt
Lacoste, and Brandon Bolden, who's been a special team staple and backup running back for years. It's not pretty in the Patriots world.
And then Torin as well, the well-known
lineman. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder whether Belichick had asked the players from the Patriots to decide early whether they were opting out. Because it seems to be that we've suddenly got like 15 million in cap space that we didn't have. And it just feels a little bit like he might have said, look, by all means go, but can you tell us a week early so we can make plans? Just feels that way.
Yeah.
If it's going to happen, it's good. That's good management.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right, Griff. I think he obviously wants to plan what he can plan. I think there's there's still loads of questions about the whole season as a whole and opt-outs and what happens if someone catches COVID, what happens if your quarterback catches COVID on a Saturday and can't play on a Sunday? All those things will probably need to have. There needs to be plans for that as well. So it's not just the players that are opting out that you kind of plan around. Yes, that's a long-term thing, which obviously you need to kind of start looking at. If it's bringing in people off the free agency list, fair enough. If it's promoting younger players who perhaps haven't had the first team experience, fair enough. But then from a coaching and from a management point of view, it's all those kind of other plans which you've got to have at the back of your head. What happens if Cam Newton catches COVID? And, what happens if your whole quarterback room catches COVID because they're all in a meeting and they're all suddenly out? What happens? I don't know.
Belichick plays quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. What happens if all your offensive line are out? What happens if one position group is out? Then potentially, does the NFL say, okay, well, you can move your bye week to this week and fill the game in later? All these questions, I think, are still very much up in the open, and no one's kind of from the NFL or from any team has got any answers, and that's the biggest worry for me.
I'm amazed that they're not considering a bubble system of some kind.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting I know how it would work because there's so many people involved, but maybe the players have to be told if you're going to play the season, you're all living at the facility.
I don't
know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Panthers it's the Panthers that have started to do something similar where each player basically has one of the suites within the stadium as their living quarters.
One of the teams have booked out a hotel, haven't they?
Yeah.
The Saints have told everybody they can stay in this particular hotel,
yeah.
But they don't have to.
But I think it has to be enforced to an extent because there's no point having a bubble and protecting your team if the player's then going off and being with his family as they rightly want to be, and his wife's been out shopping that day and suddenly she's got it and suddenly he's got it, and then he goes to a meeting and, like I say, suddenly your whole offensive line is out for next Sunday. I think we've seen kind of success with the NBA and their bubble. Obviously, they've got a lot less people. And on the flip side, we've seen a lack of bubble with Major League Baseball, and teams are literally falling over and games are being cancelled.
Games, aren't they? Left, right, and centre. Whole series are under threat.
It seems like a big mess.
Well, the Raiders are fine because they haven't caught anything in years, and
Well, Nelson Aguilar would be perfect.
Telegraphing one in there. Nelson Aguilar gets a mention. Excellent work, everybody. Yeah, I mean, we've already seen big names who are pulling out apart from the Patriots players. So Matthew Stafford's on the reserve list. I assume to do with the fact that his wife has had a brain tumour, and so they're pretty much isolating. But when is it suddenly safe for him to come back to work then, if that's the case? Because without him, their season's done.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I think, that he's not kind of officially opted out yet, but as soon as like one of the main big starting quarterback opts out, I think we're going to see. I think there's going to be some interesting conversations. I think it's, some of the bigger players that are already out, like you say, Patriots linebacker Donta Hightower. Bears defensive tackle Eddie Goldman. That's a big player for them. Chiefs offensive lineman. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. I'm going to try it. Apparently, I didn't do too bad a job. He's obviously, he's a medical practitioner. He's carrying on working. Fair play.
He was the first one to pull out, really, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Packers receiver Devin Funchess. God knows they need every receiver they can.
What are we going to do without Devin Funchess for the season?
And I think Jets linebacker CJ Mosley. We're going to talk about Jamal Adams, but Jamal Adams and CJ Mosley are now gone from that defense.
That team is awful.
And then the most recent one, Dolphins wide receiver Alan Hearns was announced today as opting out. Not that big a deal, but again, like Dolphins they're a team in rebuild. They can't afford to be losing experienced players.
No, Nate Solder leaving the Giants as well. That's bad news for Danny Dimes. I think that team barely protected him as it was, and he's a good player. He gets a lot of stick, but he's playing in a bad line, and he's not the worst player there. So it's going to be an absolutely disastrous season if more players keep pulling out. Marquise Goodwin at the Eagles, they're a team that has got no wide receiver depth.
Damian Williams at the Chiefs, Super Bowl sealed the Super Bowl for them with his touchdown run. Mm-hmm. That's another big loss. You put in a lot of pressure on the rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He might be great, and that might be the opening he needs, but you still want depth at that position.
Do you not think? Oh, here's the other one I thought as well. Our favourite player who runs for his life every season is Russell Wilson. Chance Womack has opted out off the O-line there. He's he's about the only guy you could put into another team and he would fit in. It's going to be a catastrophe, and also for fantasy purposes, you could lose half your team in a week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
when do we do the draft? When are we going to know who's playing and who's not playing? And the deadline is technically Thursday night this week, but
there's also going to be like a player safety issue as well, isn't there? I mean, if you're putting in, again, I point to the offensive line. If you're putting in a lot of inexperienced players at offensive line, and you're coming up against, I don't know, the Saints or the 49ers or the Broncos, who've all got decent pass rushers, that puts your quarterback right in the target line, and he's not going to stand a chance realistically, is he? Because if you're asking a rookie left tackle who was a 6th or 7th round pick this year to go up against Nick Bosa, good luck.
Well, that's the problem. It's going to set teams on a path that they can't really recover from. You've got very little hope of turning it around if one or two of your better players decide to opt out. It's too late. You can't draft now. Free agency hasn't got a lot going for it. Teams are not going to want to get rid of players in case they lose other people. I do wonder if the season's just going to descend into a bit of a farce. And I know that can always be a thing, but it just doesn't seem very well thought through.
I think it is going to be a bit chaotic. It'll be interesting for, the sake that we'll probably see a fair few new players coming through, and that's always interesting. You're right. We could see a team come out of nowhere and be brilliant just because the fact that their division has been absolutely decimated by COVID. Whether that's fair or not, who knows? But it could also shine a light on who are the best coaches or best GMs and management team as well. And again, you've got to point to Bill Belichick on this front, and he's probably always being one of those coaches has been 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the league, and he's probably to the point earlier, he's probably planning for the fact that he won't have certain players.
Yeah, I think he will see it as a challenge. If I can win with these 8 players missing, then nobody's going to talk about Brady.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he will say. Like, this is no longer the story. He's not in the building. We can get on and do this. I mean, yeah, there are some big losses on the Patriots team, but ultimately you could lose any of those players to injury in week 1 anyway. So,
As well, divisional rivals have lost their best safety and their best linebacker.
Yeah.
So it's going to be quite easy now to throw it just over the top of the Jets. It was easy before.
It's going to be quite easy to do anything against the Jets.
It's like picking candy from a baby, except less fun.
And the Bills have lost Star Latulele as well. He's on now. So that's EJ Gaines, the cornerback. So that's 2 of the best defensive players on the Bills. So the Jets and the Bills are losing players. If they all lose players at the same rate as the Patriots, you know which team you're going to back out of those 3.
Yes, the Dolphins. Oh no, sorry.
But this is the thing. The Dolphins. Yeah, that's a talented looking team, but it's still at least a year away from being competitive.
Oh yeah, and then
before. So this division feels like it might have just fallen straight back into the Patriots' lap completely by accident. Even if they're trying to end up with a decent pick, like, it might just go that way. It all feels a bit just like no one's in control, and Belichick comes out on top again. Is a little bit how it looks, but I don't know. Maybe it's. Speaking of, we'll touch on the fact Brady just turned 43. Was it yesterday, I think?
Yes, it was.
With some excellent trolling, by the way, of Michael Strahan.
I saw that. Brilliant.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen that, go and take a look at, was it his Instagram page?
His Instagram account, yeah. Well worth a look.
Very good. He's always very quick with the responses. I like to think he thinks them all up himself. So that was pretty good. I don't know. We touched briefly on how other sports are doing this. The Major League Baseball, no bubble, players have been asked to stay safe, but it's clearly not working. They're losing handfuls of players every day to COVID. They're getting 7-8 players on a team test positive at a time. Of course, because it's so virulent, it will go through everybody, and they travel on buses and things together. And then the other side of this is the NBA, who are all playing at in Florida at Disneyland.
Disneyland? I think it's Disneyland. I don't know though.
Right, they're playing
Disney
Disney
Park. The Disney Park in Florida.
But then there's only, including the subs, there's only 9 players on a team and a bench. And so it's much easier to manage. It's I don't know. I just feel like this has been seriously underthought, and maybe you look at what college football are doing. They're playing only interdivisional games, almost entirely across the board. I wonder whether the NFL could have done something like that and just said, we're going to play in this stadium, and you're just playing each other on rotation.
Yeah,
potentially. Or else, I mean, they could have thrown a complete curveball and said, right, we're going to reduce traveling, and we're literally going to make you play in a geographic area. So you could have a division that's got the Jets, the Giants, New England, and who else? Washington.
Buffalo,
Buffalo would be a good one. So, and there could be that way, but still, like, even if you did that, the US is a big country. You're still going to have to travel in a plane, probably at the very least a bus. And to your point, you look at baseball where they're with each other kind of day in, day out. Those baseball series last over several days, and what do you do during that day? You spend time with your teammates. You're on buses to stadiums. You're on planes into different states. It's like it's almost an impossible situation. I guess the only hope is they can look at what football has been like in Europe, and I think the Premier League, the Bundesliga, all the other leagues have been generally quite successful in controlling it. And being able to play games and traveling around. It's obviously not the same distances, but I think it's been a lot more successful here than it has been in the US. But then the background to that is the US just hasn't handled COVID full stop.
Yeah.
Well, that is the bigger problem. The whole country is basically rife with COVID outbreaks.
But you look at Formula One. They're in their own bubbles.
Yeah.
And there's 20 F1 drivers. One of them got it.
Yeah.
20 out of so many billion people, and they are some of the most protected people in the world at the moment, and one of them got COVID. So he's having to do his 10 days isolation, and he's missing 2 Grand Prix. I'd feel a lot more confident in the F1 preparations than I do with the NFL.
Yeah.
So, I do worry. I do really worry that we're going to have.
Yeah, and the other thing about baseball is like technically you can play baseball with social distancing. Realistically, you can't do that with the NFL, with football. Like literally, everyone's on top of each other at one point in time. Like you're breathing each other's breath, you're sweating on each other, you're bleeding on each other.
We're still talking about the NFL.
Yep. It's impossible to have any type of social distance. Just the game doesn't work with it. So even in baseball, where you could restrict it, you could restrict kind of the spread of COVID to 18 without having kind of testing and results that come back to you within minutes rather than weeks or days. You're never going to tell if someone's actually got COVID and they're on the field spreading it around.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult.
Literally, just this second, Stafford has been taken off the COVID list.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And unfortunately for the Jaguars, Gardner Minshew was put on and then came off it. So he's available to play as well.
I think, there's going to be pressure on quarterbacks, isn't there, to not opt out? Realistically. And I think, the flip side is, I think every coach has got a pass this year. Like you can't ask any coach because the coach is saying, I didn't have my team. They're all gone.
I didn't have no team, no preparation.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means we have 2 more years of Doug Marone.
Another year of Adam Gase.
Oh, God.
Oh, Christ. Yeah. I mean, I know Doug Pedersen's coaching the Eagles from home, isn't he? Because he's got
he's contracted.
There is no way that we get through this without at least one team being completely decimated. And then I don't know what you do. You can't suddenly start moving bye weeks around. That doesn't work. It affects too many things. TV is king. You can't do it. So I don't know how we get a full length season. I cannot imagine a scenario whereby that works.
I really don't think we do. I think we'll have a complete season. There'll be a Super Bowl winner at the end of it. Whether every team has played 16 regular season games or not is another question. This is where the system around winning percentage comes into play, because technically you don't have to have played all 15 games to have a winning or all 16 games to have a winning percentage that beats someone else. So that's I think that's one of the benefits of that, is that teams don't have to play every game to be able to.
But then you end up with teams saying, "Oh yeah, but we had to play the Chiefs twice." And somebody else only played 14 games and ended up with a better winning percentage because they played the Jets twice or whatever. You'll just end up with legal challenges,
but it's never fair, is it? Because every team has a different schedule all the time.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
There was always that case. Like everyone in the AFC East has to play the Patriots twice a year. Everyone now in the AFC West has to play the Chiefs twice a year, whereas no one in the NFC West does. It's like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. It feels like another problem waiting to cause another problem. I almost feel like I'd have been happier if they'd just said, we're not doing this season. But they can't. So it's going to make it extremely interesting to watch. I have no idea where you start drafting for fantasy purposes. I cannot begin to imagine how you do that, because you're going to be chopping your team apart every week. It almost doesn't matter, I think. But so you can immediately go out and just draft Patrick Mahomes and hope for the best. That's your answer right there. Let's move on slightly then. There was a massive trade, and it is a massive trade. So Jamal Adams gets his way, gets out of the Jets, just like everybody should. The compensation is heavy for a safety. So the Seahawks have given up 2 first-round picks. But if he makes the difference to that team over 5 years, the chance of you getting 2 really good first-round picks in a 5-year rotation?
So I think there's a couple of things here. Yeah, it's 2 first-round picks for a safety who's probably top 2 safety in the league. Derwin James, I'd have slightly above him. I don't like his attitude either. I think he obviously crafted his way out of New York, and fair enough. I think it's one of those trades though that both teams have sort of won, which is pretty rare because the Jets lose a player who doesn't want to be there, so you kind of have to say, well, it's better that he goes, and they've got 2 first-round picks, plus they got a replacement in Bradley McDougall as well, who's a decent safety. Okay, it's not as good as Jamal Adams, but he'll certainly.
Who is?
Yeah, well, Derwin James. He'll certainly kind of fit that bill. And I was thinking about, I did a bit of research about this, and the Seahawks, they're not really good at drafting in the first round.
No.
Like, this is their first round picks from the last 10 years. Jordan Brooks this year, sorry. LJ Collier, Rashad Penny. 2017, they had no pick. They traded out. 2016, Jermaine Ifedi. 2015, 2014, and 2013, they had no first-round picks. 15 was Jimmy Graham. 14, they traded out. And 13 was Percy Harvin. 2012 was Bruce Irvin. Decent pick. 2011 was James Carpenter, guard. And then 2010, they had 2 picks, Russell Okong and Earl Thomas.
Good pick.
Yeah, that was good back then.
That's like one good pick in 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think it's a lot to give up when you look at it like that. I mean, he could be a stud in that defense with the right coaching for 5 years plus. So,
and I guess the other thing, and you touched on this earlier with regards to fantasy, but also with regards to the actual draft next year, that could be a washout as well. Like, who knows what's going to happen with college football? Risking your first-round pick this year, well, not risking it, losing it for a guaranteed player quality is actually probably a good move.
It's a fair point because we don't know what the draft is going to look like. It could be a bunch of players who've barely played.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to be relying on little scouts are going to be relying on tape, which is going to be at that point over a year old. Are they still the same player in 2021 as they were in 2019?
It's going to certainly be interesting. Good evening, Gary.
Hello, Gary.
How we doing? Sorry, I'm late. Not my fault. Somebody else's fault.
Always is.
Lazy.
Always better
Gary,
to come last, John. Always better to come last.
Gary, anything you'd like to add to the debate on the Jamal Adams trade and the value that the Seahawks have given up?
What do they give up in the end? 2 firsts or something? Or
2 firsts and a safety.
Yeah,
and a third as well.
I hope you've basically said that's a ridiculous amount to give up for Jamal Adams.
It is a lot to give up on a safety.
It's too much. Way too much. And the Seahawks have got quite a few gaps in quite a challenging division. So my opinion is I think that I get it that he's an established player and he's clearly talented and there's not loads of great safeties around in the league at the moment, but isn't Eric Reed available on free agency?
Yeah. I guess that's the point. Like, do you need
he's what, like 30 or something?
Do you need like a top caliber safety?
Punt on some talent. That's just a Pete Carroll thing to do, innit? But I don't really agree with it.
Fair enough.
I've turned up and Griff's still wearing a Redskins t-shirt just to fuck everyone over. Has anyone else noticed that?
Yeah, maybe. Do you agree on the John Lynch contract extension, though?
Yes.
Do we like this move?
Yeah, I do. Like, he's, we kind of predicted it the other week when you were talking about Kyle Shanahan's extension. These guys have obviously built a good working relationship. They've taken a team that's, was picking in the top 10, which was absolutely decimated by the previous regime. And they got to the Super Bowl. What's not to like? The only thing missing is a Super Bowl win. They can't, aside from that, they can't have done much more. So, you've got one of the most talented coaches in the league. You've now got him locked up. John Lynch has been, he's worked well with Shanahan. I think the actual power lies more with Shanahan than Lynch. I think Lynch is pretty much is there to do Shanahan's bidding in terms of helping him build a team. but it's working well. So why wouldn't you extend it and keep it going for a few years?
Yeah, that seems like it's all fair and reasonable. Like you say, the key thing is in the time they've had together, you can't really have got much more out of a team that was on its knees.
No, exactly. And let's be fair. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is an okay quarterback. He's probably bang average, and they got to Super Bowl with an okay quarterback. So that's a sign of building a good team.
So I actually reasonably agree with Jim on this, which normally doesn't actually happen. In some ways, I think that John Lynch has probably been as impactful as Kyle Shanahan to that team. I think he's been very clever with our kind of draft. We've built the defence on real kind of solid talent, and then we've very cleverly added short-term experienced players into the mix. So I think we've added experience whilst building, options on our defence. So options to trade out of, options to trade up in the draft with. So I think he's been quite clever to make sure that he's got quite a balanced squad at all times. Whether that's led by Shanahan or him, I suppose, we won't know because we don't know what discussions they have. I'm sure it's a pretty joint approach, but I think definitely it's created a team culture that is built on people that are looking to develop, and then some great veterans in and around that, which seems to be building quite proactively to the future. He looked at it and went, I can't afford to, keep DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. And is Buckner the better player? Yes. But, is Armstead slightly more experienced? Yes. So do I want to keep him around? And then I'll just go away and get Kinlaw in the draft.
Also cheaper as well.
He's cheaper. So
yeah.
Then you get Kinlaw. So I think he's quite astute in terms of having been a former player. I think he's quite astute in understanding how that locker room dynamic needs to work alongside Shanahan.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest changes, isn't it? I mean, you look at that locker room from Harbaugh through to Tom Sula through to Chip Kelly, and it just wasn't a cohesive unit. I mean, that culture change has come from Lynch and it's come from Shanahan, and they've picked players who they want to bring into the team, who might not necessarily be, your blue chip kind of free agents. There's not many of those they kind of picked up where, they could have gone in for Jamal Adams. Our safeties aren't brilliant. They could have put Jamal Adams alongside Richard Sherman, and we probably would have been celebrating. But they looked at it apparently, and it cost too much. So they didn't. And I think his character would have turned them off as well. They've been, Gary's right, they've been really sneaky in some of the trades they've made, but also some of the deals they've made as well, and some of the contract extensions as well. Like D Ford's contract extension, everyone's like, yeah, but he's always injured. It's like, yeah, but the future money isn't guaranteed. There's a lot of incentives there, and there's a lot of incentives based on playing time, so they can get out of it quickly if he is injured.
Jordan Reed's the same, isn't he?
Exactly. You look at, they picked up Jordan Reed this year, and it's an incentive-laden contract. Well, that's, for me, says if you play, we're going to pay you, and if you don't, we're not. So fair enough, and that's a good risk to take on a player who was one of the best tight ends in the league a few years back.
I think what you'll see with the 49ers, they've got some good characters there at the moment, some good kind of kudos. I think the Niners might grow again over in the UK as well. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we'll win a Super Bowl. I don't know yet. I'd love to say we will, but I think we'll be there or thereabouts the playoffs for the next 5 years, potentially. And that's what you need. You need a sustained run of success to grow your popularity, which grows the turnover, etc., etc. So John Lynch would have done his job.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly appears to the outside spectator that they are doing an excellent job as a pair. And that is key. That's all you can ask for, really, is to have a pair who work as well as they do together. I think you'll be right up there again. How close you can be to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I don't know. But
I think the question is still offense, isn't it? If you line up the Bucks offense now against the Niners offense, which one are you going with? If you line up the Saints offense against the Niners offense, which one are you going with? And if you line up the Chiefs offense against the Niners offense, which one are you going with? Like, if you did the same with defence, I'd be quite happy to sit there and have a conversation with you. But on offence, I still don't think if a game gets away from us, can we go down the field and definitely score that winning touchdown?
Yeah.
I don't know, because that's what happened in the Super Bowl. We held them, and when it became a shootout, we had no bullets to fire. So, is that still the same problem? I've arrived on top form. I've been sat at the bar thinking about this, waiting for my steak for an hour and a half. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think if it came to a straight shootout again, you're still, as you say, limited for the rounds you can fire compared to several other teams. However, it's still a very good team, and you've got as good a chance as last year of at least getting to the game, and then eventually luck will tell. So
I think as long as you're relevant in December, and by that I mean you're challenging for a playoff, you're in that hunt, you're on the when they show kind of in the hunt for the playoffs, you're in that graphic on TV. I think after that, a lot of it comes down to luck as well. Most of the time, the playoffs, there is a big hefty element of luck, unless you're.
I think there's less of that now he's retired, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah. Very good. Somebody was going to make the obvious joke. Just while we're talking about quarterbacks, the Stafford news actually is he had a false positive test. They've just released to say that he tested negative, false positive, and then 3 consecutive negatives. So he's been reactivated, along with Justin Coleman, who's a cornerback on that team as well. So they had some false positives, and that's something else that nobody seems to have mentioned, that can easily throw a team into turmoil. Your quarterback false positives on a Monday, you game plan around someone else, and then you're playing on Thursday or whatever.
If we're touching on COVID, please tell me you've seen the video of Donald Trump with the reporter, where he doesn't seem to understand that the fact they've had less deaths per cases, but the most deaths in the world. He keeps going on and on about it. Please tell me you've all seen it.
No,
I have. Unfortunately, they do have. The US does have less deaths per cases than the UK.
That's true, but still the most deaths.
I mean, he's an idiot, but we shouldn't be bragging too much, really.
No, exactly.
The only thing is, how much would you trust that their reporting is accurate? I'd trust ours more.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that.
No, I probably would. Anyway, I think back to your point, Griff. I think you're right. I mean, a false positive is going to throw out a game plan, but what the other option is even worse. What happens if false negative? And suddenly you've given COVID to everyone in the team. It's like, then you're really screwed. So it comes back to having reliable testing that can give you a result, within minutes. At the moment, tests within weeks, test results coming within weeks or even days. It's a waste of time almost.
They're talking about 90 minutes now, aren't they, for doing a test?
Yeah.
In which case,
but as well, we have to control the environment, and if there's going to be fans and someone scores a touchdown and jumps into the crowd,
But I think, haven't they said the fans are going to have to wear masks?
Well,
I don't know. If I'm perfectly honest, I haven't kept up with the fan situation. I know some of them are planning to run at about 20% capacity.
Most NFL fans in America are the ones currently slapping Burger King staff and running out of Whole Foods, shouting, I've got medical exemption. So I don't think that is going to be the answer. But
well, when you're morbidly obese, you tend to have breathing difficulties, don't you?
Not that we're
say that out loud. Sorry to our American listeners that I've just lost us.
Both of them.
Move us on, Griff. Move us on.
Moving on. Right, NFL
Jim's
top 100 controversy.
Oh, actually, can I just mention something else?
No.
Have you seen part of the XFL, of course, has been bought by The Rock.
Yeah.
And they've already announced they're bubbling. They are doing protective bubbles. Their league isn't for another 6 months. They've already announced they're doing protective bubbles. So
brilliant.
I know it's easier for them, but
no, it's not, is it?
Fewer of them, but at least they've made a decision. The NFL waited too long to make a decision. And when you've got that many moving parts, you have to make the decision sooner. A little bit like, closing countries down or whatever. Right, move on to the NFL top 100 players of 2020 list. A little bit controversial, apparently. So anybody want to pick out somewhere to start on the?
Jimmy G made it in.
Yeah, number 43.
Yeah, top 50, mate.
He was
Yeah,
in the
I
top.
was actually quite impressed he made it in as well.
I think that's more based on his looks and potential partners than skill, maybe.
I think it might be based on team success, but
yeah.
he's
Well,
won a lot
no,
of games as a
his
quarterback.
stats are really good. He threw more touchdown passes than Patrick Mahomes. More yards than somewhere else. I can't remember all the stats, but I remember seeing someone post it on Twitter and thinking, actually, that's a really good stat line. He just gets he gets slammed because he's not spectacular.
He's Alex Smith, isn't he? That's what he is.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, back to your original. What controversy do you want to start in? Should we talk about Patrick Mahomes being the third best quarterback?
Go on.
Just that, really. I mean, are we okay? Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson are good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
If they were on the 49ers, I would not complain. But are they better than Patrick Mahomes, really?
I think Russell Wilson, you could argue over a long period of time so far. He's a very good quarterback. And you could argue at this point, you could say for a long time, he is the better quarterback.
But this is based on last year.
We don't know if Mahomes can come back from I know he's had this dislocated knee, but, potentially, I think Mahomes is the best quarterback, don't get me wrong, but there's an argument to say Russell Wilson is still the most all-round top quality quarterback in the league.
Yeah,
and then Lamar Jackson, we all know, can't throw a ball, so...
Yeah.
But when you add to that the fact that Lamar Jackson did more with less, I can see why both of those quarterbacks were putting ahead of him.
That Heisman, triple lineup or whatever he had to run must have been terrible with no talent around him.
Yeah, but you look at the rest of the team compared to the Andy Reid run Chiefs, I would say Lamar Jackson did more with less. And I think whilst it's certainly not necessarily the order I would have them in, I can see how they've ended up with that, definitely. But if you're looking forward to this year, I don't think that they're in that order at all at the end of this year. But, they would be so close. It was Lamar 1, Russell Wilson 2, Aaron Donald number 3, who, by the way, props to that for beating any quarterbacks into anywhere in the top 5. Well done. And then
I don't think he was. He definitely didn't have as good a season last year as he had previously. He's still a brilliant player. There's no two ways around that. But again, was he better than Patrick Mahomes last year? I know it's obviously a very different position, but I'd still be doubtful about that.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing where you get kudos and respect that carries over, because Tom Brady was the 14th best player last year, apparently, and he really wasn't.
No,
for the first time in his career, he elevated no one.
It's not. It's not last year, though, is it?
It is last year. Well, it's
not, is it? It's who are the 100 best players in the league.
Yes, I see what you're saying, but it's clearly based on what people have just seen.
Yeah,
not necessarily.
There's
not
definitely
necessarily, is it? Like I think that's suggesting that if you've had a poor season as a team collective based on whatever reasoning, that can take you from being a good player to be a terrible player.
It's just about how people would think of you as a player. I mean, Gilmore, for instance, is the first New England defensive player to make it in the top 10 for forever. But that's more or less based on his one season performance. The year before, wasn't.
Yeah, but I'm guessing is Gronk in the top 100?
No.
Is he not?
He didn't play last year.
I didn't.
And that's what I mean.
Last year.
Yeah. It is based on last year.
Then it's ridiculous.
You have to have played.
Brady should be about 65th then.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're saying.
Well, yeah.
Then I actually agree with you, Griff.
65th overall is Tyler Lockett, just so you know.
Good year.
Tyler Lockett?
Yeah.
He had quite a good season.
Yeah. He did have a good season, yeah.
All right, make Brady 75.
Did Tyler Lockett have a better season than Ryan Tannehill, who was 68th? I would say not. It's an odd... The list is just so random. Richard Sherman, 28th overall. I mean, look, he was good on your team, but he wasn't the 28th best player.
Democracy doesn't work.
American democracy doesn't work, quite clearly.
All right, comrades, calm down. Jesus.
We are literally losing fans minute by minute.
Yeah.
Socialism.
Josh Allen was 87th on the list. last year, who had a better year, Josh Allen or Tom Brady?
Josh Allen all the way. I was just looking at Tyreek Hill at number 22.
Where was
really?
Frank Gore?
Frank Gore didn't make
Did not make it. On this, there are now. I read this earlier and I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting stat." And then I read like the bit afterwards. It's like, that's not as interesting a stat. But there are 6 teams who now don't have a player on the top 100.
Yeah.
Anyone want to guess who they were?
Jags.
Yep.
Redskins.
Sorry, there are no Redskins in this league.
The
Washington football team.
The Washington football teamers is correct, yes.
It's based on last year, by the way, and there were the Redskins then. The Dolphins.
Yep.
Lions.
Broncos.
No, Broncos have got players on there.
Von Miller.
Raiders.
Von Miller, yeah.
Raiders have got players on there.
The Chargers. No, Joey Bosa's got to be on there.
Chargers have got players on there. You got 2 more to get.
Raiders.
Raiders on there. Jets, yes. Jamal Adams is the only player who was on there, but obviously he's now left. 1 more to get.
Oh, bloody hell.
Bengals.
Yes, Bengals.
Oh, of course, yeah. The worst team in the league.
Yeah, the worst team in the league.
They still have AJ Green, but he
didn't play last year.
He didn't play last year.
And as we've just discovered, it's based on last year. Yeah. I mean, but the year before there were only 2 teams, weren't there, that ended up with no players in the top 100. So it's condensed somewhat this year. I don't know whether there's anything in that or not. It's just whether teams do well or not, and players decide based on that. I think the fact that you got 5 of the 6 fairly quickly tells you that it's based on the perception of those particular outfits.
Yeah, it's also not been. There's not been a kicker on the top 100 since 2015.
No. Justin Tucker does everything right every season, never makes it. Has he ever been on there? I don't think he's ever been on there. Who was the last one? Was it Gostkowski?
No, Vinatieri.
Vinatieri. Oh, okay, right. I knew it was a New England kicker at some point. But yeah, I mean, whether this list is relevant without some sort of dividing up, does it need to be the 50 offensive players, 50 defensive players, and then the top 5 special teams players for it to have any relevance? I don't know. I don't know how.
I just think it's another marketing thing, isn't it? You get a little 100 badge on their thing. You can get those nice 100 pins, can't you, John?
No.
I mean, even Alvin Kamara's on. He was useless last year.
Yeah, he's not your favourite player. I mean, Quentin Nilsson, all right, number 29, but honestly, that guy was amazing for the Colts. He's behind Richard Sherman. I just don't see it. And Cameron Jordan at the Saints I wouldn't have said was better as a player than Nelson at the Colts.
Yeah, but I think until Sherman got burned in the Super Bowl, everyone was saying how he
had a really good season
to the Super Bowl.
He had a really good season, but he wasn't the 28th best player overall, even without the Super Bowl.
I agree with you, but
a lot of people were bigging up Sherman, but mainly for it was his presence, wasn't it? It was the leadership that not because he'd been the best player on the team, but
But the public are fickle, aren't they?
Well, it's not the public that vote for it; it's all the players.
But they're fickle as well.
They all get 10 votes, don't they?
I'm glad to see Gary knows how this process works.
Look, man, like this vote happened in the past, you know.
We all know you don't do the past. You only do the
future. Trauma on the list.
You what?
Shawarma on the list.
Always, mate. Always. The only one of the
Cousins is
before Cam Newton, he was the only other MVP to get a deal on the minimum league contract, wasn't he?
He was
He was MVP. So I know my Kurt Schwarman facts. So that, John.
Did anyone? There's no reason why any of you guys would have watched this, but the New England press conference. Did anybody see that this week?
No.
Where they basically just flat refused to talk about Cam Newton, and they just mentioned all the quarterbacks as a quarterback room and said that it was an open competition.
Which basically means Cam Newton starts week 1.
Yeah.
Well, probably, but it didn't just come from Belichick. It came from like Matthew Slater, David Andrews, all the team captains basically had got the same line, which was it's just a quarterback room and it's an open competition. And you're like, and they were bigging up Brian Hoyer, which made me think of you, Gary, basically saying what a leader he is in the locker room.
Yeah.
It just shows and the NFL players know nothing.
Maybe.
I didn't see him in the top 100. Was Cam Newton there?
No,
He didn't play last year.
No,
He played once, didn't he?
He had a couple of
Played
games.
half
But
games or something, yeah.
he's not in the top 100, no.
But if we get anywhere near a full season this year, I bet you he is.
Probably, yeah.
Because, you know, with the team falling apart and people leaving at the Patriots, the O-line isn't going to be that great. And it may not matter if he is fit. If he is fit. It may not matter. Like the Russell Wilson thing. Like, he hasn't had no line ever, but he's number 2 on the
Cam will
list.
have his dancing shoes on, won't he? Normally does.
You'd have thought
At least,
so.
I suppose Edelman, but yeah.
Yeah,
At least Russell Wilson has Tyler Lockett. You know.
And DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got
Campbell
Edelman and Sanu.
But you never know.
Never mind.
Edelman might have spent the whole summer guzzling steroids as usual, and
Is he not just
only
in the corner crying that he's not playing with Tom Brady anymore?
yeah.
Tom wants everyone else, but not me. He'll even take Shady McCoy. He's been bad for 3 years.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. McCoy going to the Bucks. Yeah, I mean, is that in any way an upgrade for that team?
Well, I think they're all just hunting Brady's rings, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an upgrade over the nobody that they had last year. But...
Yeah, he's a better passing back than was it Ronald Blair. Brady always wants a decent passing back to dump the ball off to. So there's that option.
Super Bowl winning Shady McCoy.
Yep, that's right.
He wasn't in the squad though on game day, was he?
No, he still gets a ring.
Still won the Super Bowl.
Oh dear, you still get a ring. Oh bloody hell! Well, even I've got a ring in that case. Oh, there's all my stuff falling off the table. Never mind. Right, there's a couple of things left to cover. Yannick Ngakoue, what do the Jags do? Because he wants out. They want to keep him. Where do they go with that?
Trade him.
Yeah.
He's not.
You can guarantee what they do will be wrong.
Yeah.
Because of the Jags.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suspect you're absolutely right there, John.
They should have traded him before the draft.
Yeah.
Like they would have got a first round for him before the draft. Now it's like, well, no, just.
Well, the value of trading for him for the start of this season might be negligible compared to before this COVID issue, mightn't it?
That's what I'm saying. If they would have done it like before the draft, when everyone thought, "Oh, everything's going to be fine come September," they would have got a first round for him. I think they'll, if anything, it's like Jadeveon Clowney last year. Like, what did he go for in the end? Like a third?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
It's that's going to be the situation that they're faced with. They have to take
the problem is it takes out anybody who's in win now, doesn't it? Because you don't know if now is going to exist. So it needs to be, and he's quite young, isn't he? And got quite, what is he, 26, 27?
Yeah,
so
maybe not even that.
So I think you need a team that he's building. Probably be good for someone like the Texans if they had any kind of capital to go and get him. Someone like that. But I don't think they've got anything to afford him, have they? So if I'll tell you one team who should try and get him really is probably the Colts because they're building very nicely and they've got the cap space and they're not win now this season, but they could be in a winning place next season. So I think the Colts should go and get him.
Not bad.
That's certainly an interesting one. I hadn't considered that. I'm never a fan of players being disruptive. A bit like you were saying with Jamal Adams, whether it's a bit of an attitude problem to be handed all this money and then not want to play on the team you're on. But I can't see why anyone would want to stay at the Jags. I do not get it. It's an appallingly run organisation that can't get out of its own way.
Yeah.
I don't know how else you'd sum them up.
I can't disagree with that. And you're right. I think Jamal Adams was openly disruptive. Yannick Ngakoue, okay, he's had some issues in the past, but he's not been openly as disruptive as Jamal Adams. He just said, I don't want to be here. I'm not signing a contract. They gave him the franchise tag, and he's like, no, I don't want to be here. I'm not signing that. They can't fine him because he's out of contract. So what do you do? There's literally nothing they can do other than kind of make him wait it out. And what use is that for anyone?
He will be somewhere else, but I really don't know where. I'm not sure the Texans are capable of making a good decision either. So
Washington, they could probably afford him as well.
Yeah, the Raiders.
Play for Ron Rivera.
It's a good
yeah,
shout.
that's not a bad shout. Yeah, I quite like that one.
I think Washington are quite set on their defensive line now that they've got Chase Young. But yeah, Raiders maybe, Cardinals.
Yeah, Cardinals is a good shout.
There's a host of teams that will take an edge rusher that is as good as that. Like someone will nab him if it comes up.
What about Jadeveon Clowney then? What do we think of that situation?
Seahawks.
The fact that you reckon he's just going to end up back with the Seahawks? That's what I think. I think
he'll end up back at the Seahawks for half the money he wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he priced himself out of the market, and there isn't a market now for.
The market got worse. Yeah.
The market got worse. It's getting increasingly worse as well. I guess one of his big hopes. It sounds terrible. Is that a big time edge rusher opts out because of COVID and he gets a 1 year deal somewhere else. So say if Myles Garrett kind of said, right, no, not having this, the Browns are back in play. He's been rumoured to go to the Jets, but the Jets don't want to spend money at the moment for some obscure reason. And realistically, anyone who goes there is going to go there to waste their career this year and next year. He's been rumoured to the 49ers as well. They're meeting with Dion Jordan and Ziggy Ansah, so they obviously want some depth at edge rusher. Imagine Jadeveon Clowney, D Ford, and Nick Bosa on the edge.
Amazing. That'd be an amazing team.
Yeah, but I can't see that happening. But I'll keep my fingers crossed. So, edge rushers, and this applies to Ngakoue as well. That's a premium position, so they'll find somewhere. It'll take until probably a week or so until the season starts, and someone makes a decision. It's like, yeah, actually, our edge rushers are terrible. We need to bring in some depth here, and someone will sign him up at the last minute.
I did wonder whether Clowney would end up at the Patriots on a 1 year deal. Now we've got some cap space because we will need something to give us some defensive production because it's predominantly defensive players that have opted out for us.
Yeah,
and we cleared cap room. So either one of those players on a 1 year deal would be brilliant for us.
Yeah, Belichick's got a history of taking veteran players on a prove it deal and then let them go again. Yeah, exactly.
Broncos have some space. I'd love to see him on one edge. Oh, just
Von Miller.
The
Bears could always cut Jimmy Graham in his £8 million salary and just sign somebody they actually need.
Yeah.
Imagine Jadeveon Clowney and Khalil Mack on either edge.
That's what I mean. The Bears at the moment have got nothing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a winning team at the moment, is it? You wouldn't have thought. But
not really.
It's certainly. I'm surprised that Clowney hasn't been signed because I thought experienced players would be at a premium. Now there's been very little to no practice, and teams are going to want to get players in who can basically lead from the front and know what they're doing. So it surprised me that he's still out there.
Yeah, I think there's that price issue, but I also think it's not really fair to kind of carry on labelling him with this, but he does have a history of injuries. He's been better the last few years. And I think, I reckon people will be wanting to get him in for a physical before they commit any serious money to him. And they obviously can't do that at the moment.
Well, he wanted 20 million, didn't he? Clowney, originally. Now he'd be looking for 10 money.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You're not going to sign someone for 20 million with an injury history who you can't put for a medical.
I think for a top defensive player, if you can get him on 10 million, that's worth a punt, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a steal.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think he will be a really good piece on a decent team, but we just wait and see who. Anybody got any other business they feel they need to cover this evening? Good. That speaks volumes to what's happening in the world.
The season starts in just over a month.
What did we cover before I arrived?
COVID. Pretty much.
Fantasy?
COVID and Jamal Adams.
Did we talk fantasy or not?
A little bit, but feel free to elaborate.
Well, I suppose it's just, obviously we've gone through our own kind of discussions this week about how to approach the fantasy season. So I think it will be quite interesting to see how NFL.com fares, because, I think Dynasty is going to become more apparent, because you can do that draft and feel like you're properly involved in it based on the fact that you're making selections that will play for you at some point. Whereas picking for this year, I jokingly said you could all just get all 10 people to pick auto pick and then just wait and see what happens. It's very difficult. So it'll be interesting to see over the next, what's the first game scheduled for? The 13th of September at the moment. So most people are going to be drafting around the 9th, 9th and 10th, something like if they can, if not the previous week. So maybe the 7th.
Yeah.
Or 7th of September. So we're not going to have any pre-season games to go on. Yeah.
Barely training camps.
Barely any training camps. We're basically going to have to listen to what comes out in the States before you head into that draft. And that's going to be a very difficult draft to do. And you can go on all sorts of mock drafts where all sorts of people are basically picking basically on their opinions. So I think fantasy this year is going to be out of control. And I think...
But is that not the... In my opinion, that's why I don't think this is necessarily the year to start doing a different type of league, because you have no idea what's going to happen at all. And whilst I threw my hat in the ring for doing both, I'm not sure what the outcome of Dynasty will be, because whatever happens at the end of this year, when you've got to decide who to let go and who to keep, is going to be warped by the fact that it's been an odd year, regardless of whether we get 16 games or not.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think fantasy this year is just going to be a little bit crazy.
Along with everything else.
Yeah, and I don't know if that makes it more interesting or less, I suppose. It's definitely... I
think it makes it more frustrating, is what it makes it.
Obviously, fantasy football, I think we forget sometimes over here, and our friend Dunk would tell you, quite how big it is in the States. It is huge. Millions of people play fantasy football, and it's a big driver of their relationship with the NFL. So it's going to be really interesting how that changes and how people find that part of the interaction, I suppose.
Do you think that had anything to do with them wanting to move the date up for the opt-outs?
Potentially, yeah. But I don't think
I wouldn't have said so. I think it's more around teams managing their budgets and understanding how to get new players in a way where they can learn the playbook, I would suggest.
Well, I only say that because it's all about money. The NFL make money from fantasy, whether you want to believe they do or they don't.
Well, they do. A lot of the dynasty leagues you pay for. So
exactly.
Places like Flea Flicker and some ones like that you pay for. So clearly, dynasty makes money for the NFL. Fantasy makes money for the NFL. So obviously
somebody would have had to say.
Once we're in that zone, and then the live football starts, and we start worrying about who's going to beat who this week. Fantasy becomes a big part of how we interact with football. So I think it is important to understand how that's going to change.
I think the waiver wire could be absolutely insane this year. Just again, like it comes down again. We point to if people suddenly opt out if you suddenly lose your two starting running backs because one's on bye and one's got suffering from COVID. That game. So yeah, I think that could be fun. It's a different challenge anyway, isn't it, this year?
It's going to be the old John drafting. Who was it? Ray Rice or somebody? And then within 20 minutes of the draft, he'd been released.
No, it was Dorsett, wasn't it? Dorsett.
Justin Forsett. Like literally before we finished the draft, he'd been released. It's going to be the same. You've just drafted Le'Veon Bell, and he's gone down with COVID and opted out for the rest of the year. And you're like,
John also drafted David Johnson. And then in week one, after about 3 minutes, he did his cruise shirt, didn't he? broke his arm. He was out for the season or whatever.
In another league, I drafted Adrian Peterson second overall the year he missed the season because of his child issues.
Brilliant. Justin Forsett. There's a name of a man who never came back.
I suppose is the key comment. I think as we get closer, we'll definitely have to have a bit of an episode where we start to think about how that's going to look this year.
Well, I suspect that might be within the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure whether we'll do one next week, but I would start piecing that together now because he's going to be chopping and changing around over the next couple of weeks.
And we all love listening to Gary's fantasies, don't we?
We do. I've missed them. I really have missed them. And I bet they're even more insane now. You get a hotel room.
John doesn't like them so much.
I do.
Just bullshit, isn't it?
It's just bullshit. Been listening to your bullshit for nigh on 20 years. Fucking up. Oh, well.
Longer than 20 years.
By the way, you sitting in front of that light looks a bit like you're being stabbed in the ear with a screwdriver.
Oh, it's a bit weird. I feel like I'm sat at my granny's or something. Apart from the fact I'm drinking this.
No, your granny's curtains aren't that nice.
Got a flake in that.
A head on that.
Well, I did send Jim a picture earlier of my beers, old school, chilling in the sink in the hotel in some water, because I knew I wouldn't be able to get a beer back from the bar.
Does your wife know you're having such a lovely time?
Well, we don't discuss it overly. the fact that tonight, whilst she's in lockdown with a baby, and I went for a swim, followed by some chicken wings and a steak, and then a few beers, and then catch up with you boys. Probably not best to mention.
So you'll just be telling her how awful it is to be away from home.
It's very lonely. Lonely.
Yeah, it looks terrible. Don't know how you cope. Right, if there's no more business from anyone, I will bid you all adieu, and we'll start piecing together fantasy and all the other pieces that are required.
The rest of the NFL season.
Well, I suggest we'll need to start making predictions as well, which is going to be an interesting one. I predict there is no Super Bowl. There you go.
The Jaguars are winning the Super Bowl because they've got the only team that's fit.
Yeah.
None of them talk to each other, so nobody passed on COVID.
All around Florida, no one will play them. So it's just forfeit.
Yeah.
Home advantage, forfeit.
Gardner Minshew, the Super Bowl MVP.
They get absolutely ruined.
Imagine, John, if Gardner Minshew was Super Bowl MVP.
Apoplectic.
I'd make him wear a sweatband for about 6 months just for.
Do you remember when Steve got really drunk and spent the whole time calling the Patriots as a whole the C word?
I don't think any of us can ever remove that from our memories.
I won't be drunk. That's the only difference.
Honestly, I've never laughed so much in a car journey on my way from anywhere as I did taking him back. He was just so angry about the Patriots come back. It was hilarious. Angry drunk Steve is brilliant. And we won. Right. Thank you for listening, everybody, if you did. And for watching on YouTube. I see like 13 people watching the last one.
Woohoo!
Wow.
That's 13 more people than normally watching me. So that's pretty good. And we'll see you all again soon on the Snack UK
spends a lot of time in a lay-by as well.
I do. Dogging. Bye.
Bye.